Hello, everybody. I am super excited to join you today. Just so you know, today's conversation in our Authors of Corner is about self publishing. So, we're going to do a class today about intro to self publishing. So, if you know someone who wants to write a book, let them know about today's class. And if you know that they're interested, they can go to Cayenne Wellness's YouTube page under the live tab and watch today's class. So, again, if you're listening and you know you have a friend who's not here, but who would be interested in publishing their own book, definitely tell them about today's class because it's not often that you find a free class that will give you really great information that will help you on your journey to self publish. So, definitely share this conversation with anyone you know that is interested in publishing. So, without further ado, I'm just going to tell you very quickly a little bit about myself. So, I am a caregiver. I am a mom to twins. My children are now 17 years old. And when they were 5, I wrote my first story that I published 6 years later. So, just like many parents and teachers and educators, I love to write, to teach, to talk to people. But it took me a while to actually have the courage to share my words with other people. And so, if that is you, you are not alone. So, if you are listening today, let me know in the chat if you want to publish a book. So if you have ever thought in your mind, I want to be an author one day, type in the chat yes. So if that is you, type in the chat yes. So, like I said, we are going to be going over our first class, which is Intro to Self Publishing. And I just want you to know that it is amazing to hold your first book in your hand. I remember the day when I received my very first book. I had been working on it for a long time and it came in the mail and I opened it and I cried. It was definitely a tearful moment where I shed some tears. Yes, welcome, Tarina. It is good to see you. It is good to see everybody who is joining us today. Definitely tell your friends about today's class because we're really going to start talking about some good information. Now, I have gone on to publish over 13 books. So, my very first book I wrote when my children were 5. Now they are 17, and I've written many, many books. My daytime job is a marketing manager at Cayenne Wellness Center. So, if you are joining, this is a gift that Cayenne Wellness Center is giving to all of you so that you can learn how to self publish. So, we're really going to get into it today. And I want you to start preparing the questions that you have. Good evening, good afternoon, Gina. So if you are on the West Coast, it is around 4 your time. If you're on the East Coast, the time that we're recording this is around 7. So this is just an amazing opportunity to learn more about the self-publishing process. And so I am going to go ahead and I am going to share my screen so that you all will have an opportunity to learn more. All right. So, okay. And we are going to present. All right. So I know that you're seeing the presenter view. So let me stop sharing really quickly. Yes. So I see a comment. It says, wait, what? We are about to be authors up in here. Let me get my notes together. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is what we are talking about in today's Authors Corner. If you've ever attended any of the Authors Corners in the past, we used to have different authors that would come on, read their stories, or do an interview where they're talking about their stories. And this year in 2026, we wanted to do something a little bit different because we know that everybody has been tuning in and listening to other people's journey. But today, we want to bring you on that journey yourself so that you're not just listening to other people. You have an opportunity to share your own story. So that is what is different today. Today is about you. So say it with me. Today is about me. It is time for me to publish. So say it with me. Today is about me. It is time for me to self publish. And so I know many of you who've had to present before. Sometimes getting the slides together often takes a few minutes, and I'm not trying to show you my notes. So I gotta put it in the right view so that you can see. All right, all right. Um, let me see. Let me do that one more time so that you guys can see what I see. All right. The third time is a charm. So I am really, really excited about today's topic because it is something that I truly love to talk about. So, all right, let's see. I'm going to try it one more time. Share screen, and we're going to go to the entire screen. We're going to share. And let's see if we see the full screen. Do we see the full screen? So tech team, let me know if you all can see the full screen.
Yes, ma'am, you're clear.
Okay, perfect. So, like I said, today we are talking about intro, introduction to self publishing. So, I mentioned that I have published 13 books. My very first book is what you see on the screen, which is a sickle cell coloring book for kids. It was not the first book I wrote, but it was the first book that I published. And one of the things that I want to share with you, when I published this coloring book, I didn't really feel like a real author at first because I was like, it's a coloring book. And sometimes you search about yourself online and you see people's comments, and someone said, I bought this coloring book because I wanted to give it a try, but it was so much more than that. And it was that comment that really helped me have the courage to publish more books because I wanted to add value to my community. And although I made it a coloring book because at the time I was homeschooling my kids, and I wanted an activity where parents felt like they were doing something with their kids. They were learning alongside their kids because that was my experience. And so what I had hoped to happen really did come true. And so that was my very first book, a sickle cell coloring book for kids. By the time I published it, I wrote it when my kids were very young, but by the time I published it, my kids were around 11. And so I actually wrote the Ultimate Sickle Cell Activity book because that was more so where they were in their learning. And so I needed to create something that my kids could kind of chime in, give me feedback, let me know. And so that's why I published the Ultimate Sickle Cell Activity book. So let's talk a little bit about self-publishing. When we talk about self-publishing, sometimes people frown up. And just like I didn't feel like a coloring book was really a real book at first. And I just want to come out and say to you, a coloring book is a real book. And to date, I published that book in May of 2020. And that is my most purchased book to date. So I have sold over 4,000 coloring books. So it is very much a real book. And so don't let anything or anybody make you feel like your book isn't a real book, because it is. And if you can hold it in your hand, if people can read it, if people can glean from it, if people, if you are impressed by it, that's what matters. And so that's what I want you to understand today. So in doing a self-published class, yes, we're talking about self-publishing, but by no means are we saying that self-publishing is less than any other type of publishing. So let's talk about it. Understanding self-publishing, historical context, from vanity presses to digital platforms. So sometimes you may have a friend or a family member who decided to publish with a different company. And they said, oh, I paid this company to publish my book. And they're not a major company. It's, maybe another friend published their book under their publishing company. That is a vanity press. A vanity press is when you have another person or organization or press company, probably not one of the big name companies like HarperCollins, Tyndale Publishing, probably not one of those, because those big names are traditional publishing. But a vanity press is people who have really learned this publishing game well, and they help other people publish. And so they can be companies. Usually they're on the smaller side than HarperCollins or Tyndale. So we kind of don't do vanity presses that much in my home, mainly because we want to have more control, to have more say about the illustrations, about the editing process, about when the book is published, when it goes to print, when people can purchase it, if they decide to pre-purchase, if you're going to do a big launch. It just, using your own self-publishing company or choosing to self-publish does give you control. But it can also mean to some people that your book may not be, to some people, they may hear self-publishing and think, oh, that's not as widely received. Like I said, I have, my coloring book alone has sold over 4,000. So just because you self-publish does not mean that people won't receive your book well. I've had hospitals, organizations, health departments, all types of different people purchase my books, and companies. So just because you're self-published does not mean that in any way that it's less than. So, but it can give you control to make the timeline faster. Now, in traditional publishing, I talked about that just, pretty quickly. And I just want to say that it can be hard to be someone that is not known in the community or in the world, and you get a traditional publisher who believes in your vision and thinks they're going to sell a lot of books with you being the author. So a lot of times book publishing companies want to sell a lot of books. And if you're not a name that really brings in that recognition where people can really purchase your books in bulk because they know exactly who you are, sometimes publishers are like, you don't have a great enough audience. And so it can be hard to be a traditional published person if people don't know who you are. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. And right now, with the rise of technology and certain platforms like Amazon KDP, also with companies like Ingram Spark, Draft to Digital, all of those companies really make it easy for people to self publish. And they have tutorials to tell people how to do it. You can even go on YouTube University and find tutorials on how to self-publish. And so long gone are the gatekeepers who require that you go through a big traditional publisher to publish your book. And so that can also cause you to, in some ways, so if you're not a really well-known author, you may not sell as many books, especially if they haven't really put a lot of marketing dollars behind your book. And so if that is the case, you might do better being an indie author. And so an indie author is synonymous with self-published author. And so I personally believe that I am a success story as a self published author, but there are many other people who have sold, triple, quadruple, millions more books than I have. But I'm here to share with you what I've learned so that you can do it too. So if I could do it, you can do it too. All right. So this is where we're going to get into what is different between the two. So traditional publishing, it may be a long approval process. You may have limited creative control, publisher-led marketing. That means that if the traditional publisher chooses to publish with you, they are going to put down some marketing dollars, but they're also going to expect you to do a large amount of marketing. It is not, oh, I wrote the book and then just everybody else is trying to sell it. No, you have to actively promote your own books. And I know for some of you who don't like to talk about yourself, that's hard, especially for those of us who really were taught to always be humble. This really isn't about humility. It's about creating something that meets a need that our community wants, that our community can benefit from it, and telling them about it. So kind of separate the two ideas. Don't think of this as something that is egotistical. Think of it as a way to help your community. The next thing that a traditional publisher may do is give you an advance on payments. So sometimes you hear about people getting these $1 million book deals. It is very rare that a no-name person would get $1 million book deal. But I want to say, like, somebody who, maybe went through some crazy story, like they were kidnapped and then all of a sudden years later they were found and it was all over the news and somebody contacts them and says, oh, I'm gonna give you a book deal. Well, they're contacting somebody who, their story brings in people because everybody would have heard about that story. So that's a little different. All of us don't have that harrowing tale. And sometimes people are like, oh, I want to publish my life story. Well, on a traditional publisher, if you aren't well known and you've had some bizarre story that really would command the masses to be interested in it, they're probably not going to pick up your story. So if you have a story that would really resonate with people and you believe that there is value for others in that story, then you should go ahead and self-publish. So self-publishing, quick publication. Yes, you can publish as quickly as you like. You just want to make sure you go through the right steps, which we will talk about today. And full creative freedom. You have control. Say, I have control when I self-publish. I have control when I self-publish. And then author-led marketing. Look, you are not going to be able to get away from telling people that you write books. So I apologize in advance if you never met me in person, but at some point it will probably come up in the conversation that I'm an author. It is now a part of me. I am not ashamed to say that I am an author. And so I will tell people about it. It's not the only thing I talk about because that would be annoying, but it is one of the things that I will probably mention. And so there are some people who published under a pen name. And so they may never tell you. And often those books, they're something that is leading people to really purchase those books. So there are occasions where people don't have to market and they're still able to sell those books. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. And then earnings from royalties. This is earnings from royalties only. And I would say that's not the only way for a self-publisher to earn money. So your royalties are when you put a book on a platform and they send you money. So I have books on multiple platforms, and every 3 months, so every month now I get paid, but it takes 3 months for me to get the current month's pay. So for instance, this month I have sold 74 books on Amazon this month. I'm not going to see that money from the sale until 3 months from now. So that's how it works. So sometimes when you write a book, people buy it and sometimes they don't. So we want to really talk about this because we want you to be selling books, not just publishing them. There is a difference. All right. So choosing to self-publish. All right, what are the advantages? So complete creative control over content and design, faster time to market, higher royalty percentages. So let me give you an example. I have a friend who I used to blog. So I used to be a blogger. I still kind of am a blogger, but the blogging world is completely different now than it was in the past. And when I blogged, I had a friend who was contacted by a publisher. They published her cookbook and she sold, I want to say thousands of copies at the time when I spoke to her. So now it's probably millions, but she didn't get millions of dollars. She only got the agreed upon amount that that publisher said to her. And it was about, it wasn't a lot of money. And I want to tell you that by my second year, I had already made more than she had made. And I've sold, at the time, I've sold around 5,000 books. And I've made maybe 6 or 7 times what she made with her advance. So you want to make sure that when you're publishing a book, you are making a intelligent decision, because if you know that book is going to sell, be very cognizant of what terms you would agree on in terms of what you get paid. Now, we are going to get in a little bit about how much a person gets paid. So just because you see somebody with a book on Amazon and the book is $20 doesn't mean that that person is getting the whole $20. If somebody is buying that book on Amazon, it's probably not the author sending that book out. Now, in some cases it is, because there are multiple ways to sell on Amazon, but a lot of times they're using a print on demand option, which we'll get into as well. And so that means Amazon is printing the book, they're shipping it. And so that person is pretty much probably only getting a small percentage of that sale, but they're probably getting like 40%. They're giving Amazon like 60%. So keep that in mind when you think about what platform you want to publish with. So, freedom to update and reissue books. One of the advantages, if you notice there's a problem on with one of your books, like a misspelling or something like that, you can actually correct it. And you would do that by going into the platform and uploading a new interior file. So self-publishing definitely has some advantages. All right. So, what we have here are some challenges to self publishing. I'm talking about self publishing like it's super great. I just love self publishing, but let me be real. If you allow me, I want to be real with you. Self publishing takes work. It is not easy. You got to put in the sweat and sometimes tears to make it work. So I just like to be real. I'm not going to paint roses and flowers and tell you it's just great because you're going to have to do some marketing, some editing. If you don't know how to format it, you're going to have to get somebody that formats it correctly. So there will be challenges ahead. So what to watch out for? Upfront costs for editing, design, and marketing, time intensive process, difficulty in gaining visibility. What does that mean? Difficulty in gaining visibility. If you don't like to promote yourself, if you don't like to tell people about your book, if you don't want to talk about your book, it is going to be very difficult to sell your book because you have to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, you have to hire somebody else to do the marketing for you because that is the only way people will know that it exists is if you tell them. So be very cognizant on the need to gain visibility. And just because you create some social media accounts and you're posting once a month does not mean people are seeing your posts. You have to have a regular, consistent cadence in order for people to see it. Risk of poor quality output if not professionally managed. All right. I'm gonna be very kind when it comes to this because I know people's hearts are in the right place, but you don't want your book to look self-published. You want it to look professional. You don't want to have a lot of typos. You don't want the formatting to be off. You don't want to have, different size fonts. You don't want it to look tacky. So if that is not your expertise, you're going to have to hire somebody that helps you with the professionalism of your book. All right. So this is one of my favorite slides. And this is one of my favorite slides because it's talking about your target audience. So, I know we're not doing a conversation right now. I would love to talk to you all because I definitely like engagement. And so this is kind of where that engagement comes into play. You got to know who you're writing to. And so I'm going to ask you a question. Who are you writing for? And if you answer everyone, that is wrong. That is not the right answer. No, do not write for everyone. Okay? Why is it not okay to write for everyone? Because if you write for everyone, you will reach no one. That's quotable. If you write for everyone, you will reach no one. Why is that? Why is that? That is because in order to reach a certain community, you got to speak the language of that community. So, for instance, in the sickle cell community, we say we don't really call people who are living with sickle cell disease patients. So, if somebody came out and was like, "Oh, I had a sickler patient," we would cringe and be like, "Who are they talking to?" Especially if they published a book and they put that in there, the community would be offended because that's not the language that we use. So you want to know your audience so well that you're using identifiers and jargon that is unique to that particular community. So all of my books are not children's books, only some of them are. And so I'm going to speak to you about the children's books, but my last book, which is I Believe in Therapy, it's a workbook, and it guides people through um, journaling, through being able to identify a therapist that they need, through art prompts. It's a really great book. But I had to be honest. Who am I writing that book for? And I did something that I don't recommend. So that book is a guided workbook for warriors and caregivers. Now, is there a problem with that? Technically, yes. Technically, I should have done two separate books. I should have done one book for warriors and another book for caregivers because we don't always speak the same language. And certain things that I would use to market to caregivers, I probably wouldn't use to market to warriors. And so, to be fully frank and fully honest, that book is not one of my best selling books. I think it's an amazing book. It is terrific, but it has been harder to sell because I put both together. So that's just real talk. So, right now is where your notes really come into play. Think about that book that you want to write, whether it's a children's book. So let's just pick a children's book. And I'm going to use a sickle cell coloring book for kids as an example because that was my first book. And so, who are you writing for? So, for that particular book, I wanted it to be used in clinical settings. I wanted it to be used by the care specialist to talk to their young patients and their families. So I had to identify the ideal reader who is reading it. What is their age? What are their interests? What are their demographics? So when I'm talking about the demographics, that's really, so can you all hear me? It seems like you all may not be able to hear me now. And so I am going to pause and go back. I am going to stop sharing for a second. If you can hear me, write in the chat, I can hear you. All right. If you can still hear me, I would like to hear from you in the chat that you can hear me. So I have not gotten a message yet. So we are pausing to make sure that you all. Okay, so Gina, you could hear me. Great, great. Thank you for letting me know. I did get a message asking if I was still live, and I am. So I'm going to go back to the slides. Sorry for the pause, everybody, just to make sure, just got to make sure you guys are with me, and you are, which is perfect. So we are going to resume. Okay. So we are going back to the slide. All right. So you want to make sure you know the age of the people. Why is the age important? So for your book, you want to have a recommended age. So if you're writing for preschoolers, that's going to be maybe 1 to 3. And you want to make sure that the words you use are specific to that age group. If you're writing for older college age adults, you want to make sure that you're speaking to that specific group, that the words that you choose to use will align with them and their knowledge. So you want to make sure that you have researched that community to find out exactly what they're all about. And that will help you in putting your book together and creating a cover that speaks to them, because covers do sell books. They're growing up, I would hear people say, don't choose a book by its cover, but we do all the time. We do. And as graphics become a bigger thing in our community, people become kind of picky about the book cover. And now that we have entered a season where people are using AI, we want to make sure that we are making sure that our books are well done, that they're well made, and they speak to the people that they should. For the book that I created, a sickle cell coloring book for kids, I'm able to make sure that those books show representation. I didn't want to just make my book into teddy bears. I wanted it to be real people. I wanted it to be faces and families that my own kids could relate to and other people. So when you're creating your books, your cover is just as important as the interior, especially because you must know who you are writing for. So conduct market research. Read reviews of similar books. So how do you conduct market research? You go online, and for instance, a lot of people buy books from Amazon. If you don't like Amazon, I can understand that. They definitely have a monopoly on a lot of things, but it is a good place for you to do market research. And so what you would do, you would type in, the title you want. If the title comes up, you're like, oh, that's going to be some steep competition. You probably will want to name your book something different, but you're going to look up books that are very similar to the book that you're writing. You want to look and you want to see, how much are they charging for that book? What did they put in their summary? So when you go on Amazon, you can see what that book is about. That is the summary. And you want to start formulating what information they gathered to get people to purchase their book. Now, ideally, you want to find books that have a lot of reviews, because that means they sold a lot of the books. For instance, I told you that I have sold over 4,000 coloring books, but I only have 41 reviews on that coloring book. And actually, that is the book that I've written that had the most reviews, but it's nothing compared to how many books I've actually sold. So that should tell you something. If you see a book on Amazon with thousands of reviews, they've probably sold millions of books. All right. Use your reader personas. Create profiles to guide your content. And the activity. This is what I want you to do. Describe your ideal reader in 3 sentences. Describe your ideal reader in 3 sentences. All right. So for me, I'm going to use my coloring book as an example. My ideal reader is between the ages of 8 and 10. 8 and 10 for my coloring book. And that's a little older. It's really the elementary school students. My ideal reader is between the age of 8 and 10. They are in elementary school and they are living with sickle cell disease, and they have a family that values education. So those are my 3 sentences. My ideal reader is between the age of 8 and 10. They're in elementary school and they have a family that values education. That tells me a lot about my reader. Now, there's some other things that I didn't say that also may be true. So, my ideal reader may be a person of color because, sickle cell disease does not only impact African Americans, but we do know that that is the predominant demographic for that particular condition. Also, we know that my book is also translated into Spanish because here in America, the second largest population that has sickle cell disease are people who are of Hispanic origin. So I made sure that the books meet that target audience. And so that's what I want you to do. So in the chat, go ahead and put your 3 sentences. I shared my 3 sentences with you, and I want you to share your 3 sentences with me. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do that. So go ahead and put your message in the chat. Describe your ideal reader in 3 sentences. Okay. The next thing, we're going to really unpack this very quickly, and that is conducting market research. Sometimes people tell me, oh, I want to write a book, and they haven't done any research to see if that book already exists. So it may not have the same words you will write, but it could be very, very similar. And you don't want to be competing against somebody who has the exact same thing. Now, we've been using my coloring book as an example. There are other sickle cell coloring books, and there are other sickle cell books. I do believe that just like there are different varieties of bread, you can have different varieties of books that are similar, but you want to make sure you're bringing something new to the table. And so you can only know that you're bringing a new perspective or something else of value if you do that market research. So analyze trends in your genre. So if you're trying to write a novel and it's a sci-fi novel, then you need to make sure you're reading sci-fi books that are novels. If you are planning to write something, it is helpful to be a reader in that same area as well. Don't just wing it. Definitely do your research. So study your competitors. Study the way that they're organizing their books, the way those covers are designed. Study the descriptions, study the prices. And it can be very helpful to even create a spreadsheet. So if you're a spreadsheet person like I am, create examples of things that you like in that genre so that you make sure that you're not copying it, but you can use it as inspiration to know what you plan to do for yours. You want to always put your own flair on it. Always do your own thing and don't copy people. So, but you do want to make sure that whatever you're doing is comparable. If you're the first to publish it, it may be a little bit harder if there's no other book like yours out there, that's kind of rare, because even though we often have new ideas, I'm sure you've heard the saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And in many ways, that is true. So make sure you are searching for it while doing a thorough search. And you can go on Google and do a search. So start typing in the name, type in, what you want to write about and see what comes up. And that will definitely be a part of how you conduct your market research. Engage with potential readers via surveys on social media. So we talked about knowing the language that your audience uses. The only way for you to know the language that your audience uses is if you ask them. And you can do that on social media. Instagram has polls. So definitely use that. So definitely use it for sure. All right. The next thing is set realistic goals. Set realistic goals, defining your path. Short-term goals, what would a short-term goal be? This is an example. A short-term goal is not the complete manuscript. If you're doing a children's book, it's possible. But if you're trying to do a book for adults, it's probably not likely that your short-term goal will be to complete the manuscript. But it could be to create one chapter or the first draft. So that is an example of a short-term goal. A long-term goal would be publish within a set timeline. So a long-term goal would be saying, hey, I want to publish this book within the next 6 to 12 months, or I want to publish a series about this particular topic over the next year. Or it can say, I want to make sure in my first year, I sell 1,000 books. And so that would be an example of a long-term goal. Or with this particular book, I want to make sure I sell 1 million copies. So sure, that is a very lofty goal, but if you set the goal, then hopefully you can come up with a plan to meet the goal. That's why it's important to set the goal. Sometimes you may need to dream bigger if your dreams are very and easily attainable. If your dreams are easily attainable, you may need to come up with some bigger dreams. But if it is something that is reasonable, I don't think all of your dreams should be reasonable. Some of them should be bold and audacious, because when you want to achieve that, often you will put in the work to get there. So you don't want all of your goals to be small and very predictable. Some of them need to be wild and out of this world. So establish measurable outcomes. Reviews, reader engagement. So I shared that the book that I have the most reviews on, I only have 41 reviews. And I haven't done a big job of really promoting for people to give me reviews. One of the ways that you can do that is, ask people when they buy your book to review it. And if you're somebody who buys people's books, definitely review it, because that will help them. They need as many reviews as they can get. So we don't really know how many, the actual number, but for instance, on KDP, some circles like to say that you need 20 reviews for Amazon to promote it. And so that's something that you definitely want to keep in mind. All right, our next activity. Write one short-term and one long-term goal for your book. All right, so I'm actually going to pause right now, I'm going to pause this so that I can see what one of your short-term goals is and one of your long-term goals. All right, so I see that you all have been putting comments in the chat. Please continue to do so because I like when people talk back to me. It lets me know that you're listening, that we're right on track. And so I need that. I need that from you to make sure that you are learning. I am an educator at heart, so I need to know that you're getting this information that I'm sharing. And if you have any questions, put them in the comment section so that I can see those questions. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the comments, and it says, oh, this is perfect. So this goes back to when we were talking about the demographics. So caregivers 20 and up, people of color, African Americans, and Hispanics. So that is Tarina's, her target demographic. That is excellent. So you have 3 different components. One is caregivers. So that can be broken down a little bit more. So what type of caregivers? Are we talking about caregivers who are sickle cell caregivers? You want to try to be as specific as possible. So if you're talking about sickle cell caregivers, you should specifically say sickle cell caregivers. And if you're talking about caregivers, moms and dads, aunties and uncles, sisters and brothers, cousins, siblings, what type of caregivers? Further define that a little bit more, like I'm doing with you now. And then 20 and up, that's kind of self-explanatory. She's talking to adults. So when she writes the information, she's going to make sure she's speaking to adults. Now I see she then says African Americans and Hispanics. So African American is actually a very restrictive term. I know we here in America, we say, oh, I'm African American. Some people don't like to say Black. Some people really get into the nitty gritty when it comes to how they identify themselves. So I know that you're talking about the BIPOC population, which is Black, Indigenous people of color. That's who you're talking about. And so you just kind of need to go through and kind of extract that a little bit more to get to the bottom of who you are speaking to. Gina shares between the ages of 12 and 30. Woo, that's a very large range. That's a very large range. So I'm going to actually share that we need to further refine that range because a book that a 12-year-old can glean from is not going to be the same book as a 30-year-old. Now, will there be rare circumstances where that same information will overlap? Absolutely. But I would argue, just like I told you when I wrote my I Believe in Therapy book, I wrote it for both warriors and caregivers, and I wouldn't do that again. I will say, write a separate book that's very similar for the young people than you do for the older people. So I will actually break that down into 2. Because you have to think about when you're marketing, what you say to a 12-year-old who don't have any money isn't going to be the same thing you say to a 30-year-old. So keep that in mind. So that first segment is going to need to be further refined. And let me know if you have any questions about that. Then it's warriors considering giving up. That's huge. And that is very specific. So you are talking to people who are living with sickle cell disease, who feel down and out. And so that is very particular. Like you're very specific when you're saying that. So that's excellent. Caregivers of warriors that are worn out. Okay, again, because I had to learn from my mistakes. I was like, I'm doing workshops. I don't want to have to love 2 types of books. I only want to have to take one book. And so that's why I put the book together. But like I said, it has been a challenge to sell it. So ideally, with me telling you, just with my expertise, separate those books. So you have a couple books in the work. One book you're going to write for kids. And so 12, so I'm thinking like 12 to 15. You could write those books with the same language, but 15 through 18 or 19, they're going to want a different type of book with different images, different wording. So just keep that in mind, that when you're creating these books, your illustrations will look a certain way, or the pictures will look a certain way, depending on who you're talking to. So further refine that down so that you're talking to one type. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, but excellent. You guys are doing great. All right, this next one says adults 17 to 60 living with chronic illnesses, negatively impacted by systems, particularly the healthcare system, and minorities. All right, all right. I accept that. So I know with the last one, I said break it up into two because it was minors with adults. This one, while 17 is technically a minor, they're close enough to the 18 mark. So I'm gonna give it a pass. This book is for adults, 18 and up. If I were marketing it, I would ideally say 18 and up, but what you have, I think, is enough to work with. And negatively impacted by systems, particularly the healthcare system, that does need to be further refined. So what type of negativity? Like you need to say, maybe trouble paying, whatever problem they're having, you actually need to name that. And if it's multiple problems, you need to list those multiple problems. Why is that helpful? When it comes time for you to write your description for your book, on the back of it, often there's a summary. You want to make sure you're speaking to those problems on the back, because that will tell people how to identify if this book is for them or not. And of course, it will help you with your marketing. So further refine that section, negatively impacted by systems, particularly the healthcare system. And so don't be afraid to use, colloquialisms, the way people talk. Don't feel the need to be all prim and proper if that's not how your community talks, because they're going to think you're fake, and nobody likes that. So again, I want to bring it to you in a real way, one that you are able to really understand. So excellent job. Thank you so much, everybody, for doing the work. Okay, so this next one, a short-term goal. Do a first draft. Absolutely. That is perfect. Great job, Gina. Out my heart to the paper. So write out my heart on paper. Write out my heart on paper. Okay. And then the long-term goal is publish in a year. Yeah. Okay. So yes, that is certainly obtainable. That is certainly attainable. But I had you only do one goal, one short-term goal and one long-term goal. But to really get into this, you're going to need to do more than that. So again, so short-term goal, you want to write out like your steps to take it from that beginning step where you have your first draft to where you have the complete manuscript. So write out all of the short-term things you have to do to get to that finished manuscript. Now, for your long-term goal, yes, you're going to publish that book in a year, but then what do you want to happen after you publish it? Do you want it to open up speaking gigs for you so that you can travel around the country and talk about your book? Do you want it to be a way for you to do workshops at different conferences? Do you want that book to be a way for you to talk to youth at churches? So just be more specific in your long-term goals. So your homework is to do 10 short-term goals and 10 long-term goals, and be very, very specific. So that is your homework. All right. And so I see another one. It says, this is a long-term goal. And it says, write one successful book to change a life. So I'm saying it's a long-term goal, but I know that it can also be considered a short-term goal. But to know that it changed a person's life, that's when that's going to be a longer, when you start hearing feedback from people and they tell you what they think, they tell you that it changed their life. So I'm going to put that in the long-term category. Let me know, Tarina, if you felt like that was a short-term goal, because it definitely could be a short-term goal, because it only takes you to write it, share it, to see if it changed a life. So I could see that going either way. All right. And I see that you're answering one of the questions I asked earlier. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the homework. Again, just to follow up, the homework is 10 short-term goals and 10 long-term goals. All right. So, we're going to get back to our class. And all right. We're going to go to our presentation. All right, we are here. Okay. So, essential tools and resources. Now we're talking about, how do you actually get started writing? Because all of you that were willing to share in the chat, you stated that you wanted to be able to write. You want to be able to publish. And you have your target audience, you have your short-term goal, your long-term goals. And so, what do? Some of you are going to just take paper and pencil and write, because that is the best way that you get your ideas down. And if that is the best way that you do that, then you go ahead and get your notebook, get your writing notebook, get a fancy pencil or pen, whatever makes you feel like you love writing. You go ahead and do that. Go ahead and make that happen for yourself. And so, next, what I'm sharing with you is resources. So, these are tools that are digital. So, I want to say, when I wrote my first book, I actually used a notebook. I used a notebook and I wrote it down right on paper. I had a pen and a pencil and I wrote as it came to me. But in more recent years, the more books that I wrote, I now use Google Docs or Microsoft Word. I type it up, and that saves me a little bit of time. I want to say there has even been certain books where I use dictation, where I spoke it, because one of the books that I do hope to publish soon is a poetry book. And for me, that is speaking it, the spoken word. So, whatever it is that you need to make it happen, then you need to use that. So if you're not a digital person, I'm not here to make you into a digital person. Write using whatever tool helps you write. That's my advice. I also will say that it is important to carve out some time. So sometimes I'll set a timer and say, hey, I got 30 minutes. I'm going to spend this whole 30 minutes just writing. And so if you're a person who has a very complicated and busy life, you may need to schedule time in your day on your calendar to write. And that could be, 30 minutes. It could be 15 minutes. It can be an hour. It's based on you and the time that you have. So keep that in mind. I will also say for editing, there are editing tools such as Grammarly. Grammarly is a program. They have a free version, but they also have a paid version, and that will help you edit. Even if you use a tool such as Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, you still need to hire an editor to make sure that the flow and the content is good. So I'm saying certainly use these tools. I feel like they're a little bit more helpful. Like, let's say you're doing a planner or journal. Sometimes those type of books are simple enough that you may not have to have an editor, but a lot of times that's the one thing that I don't want people to skip on when they're publishing is an editor, because it may make sense to you in your mind, but it may not make sense to other people. And we want you to be able to sell that book, and we want you to be able to sell a lot of them. And so to make sure that process is right, you may need to hire somebody to make sure that the flow, the line items, all of it makes sense. The sequence, just all of it. Now, formatting. Again, a lot of these things you can do yourself, but if it is not your expertise or your gift, hire somebody to do it. And so Canva, all of you all know about Canva. If you don't, you could type in the word Canva and see what pops up. But it is a platform that has really made graphics and creating things like books a lot easier. And Canva just had a live a couple days ago where they announced that they now have a feature that allows you to take your project and complete it offline. In the past, it all had to be online, and now it can be online or offline. So that is very new, hot off the press. And so that is something that I want you to keep in mind. The other way to format a book, a lot of professionals use Adobe InDesign, Vellum, and Kindle Create. So Kindle Create is through Amazon KDP, which is one of the publishing platforms. These are not the only publishing platforms, Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark. They're just the two that I found to be very easy, and they're the ones that I use. I've also used Draft to Digital, but I will say that Draft to Digital is now starting to charge people to put their books on their platform, because with the age of AI, they said they're just getting a lot of junk and is overworking their system. And to stop that, they're going to charge so that it can deter some people from overworking their system with what they called slop. So that is something to keep in mind. All right. So this right here is a slide where I wanted you all to make accounts for Amazon KDP and for Ingram Spark. We're not going to take the time to do that right now. We'll revisit it in the future, but those are the two places where I encourage you to make accounts. Now, just like Draft to Digital is charging people, Ingram Spark actually used to charge, but they removed the charge because so many people are using AI. It may go back. So just because these platforms are free to put your manuscripts on them right now doesn't mean that will always be the case. But it is true that it won't cost you right at this particular time that we are recording this to put your books on those platforms. All right. So online communities and learning resources. Find your tribe. One of the things, if I could do it over again, I would have created a Facebook group with people who believed in what I was writing, who were like-minded, who I could share different, bounce ideas off of, who, I would make it more of a community process. And I would also have a group that would provide strength in numbers. So the people in the group may be willing to give you a review. It may be other writers in the group, but I encourage you to join Facebook groups, writing groups, because it can be inspirational. If you are a person who social media kind of sucks you in and makes you less productive, do not do this. Okay. If you find yourself scrolling on Instagram all day, this probably isn't for you to join one of those groups, because it's going to hold you back. And so we want these groups to be an asset, not a deterrent. We want you to have free time to write the things that are important to you. So these are places for you to get ideas about topics that people are talking about. And you can search like what you're talking about to see what other people are saying. And you want to make sure that you are writing about those pain points that people are mentioning, so that they feel like your book is adding value to their life. Goodreads is an excellent place for you to do that market research that we talked about. What are people's comments? Maybe you read a comment that somebody says, oh, I wish when so-and-so wrote this book, they had added X, Y, and Z, and, such and such. Well, you have that information. And when you write your book, you put X, Y, and Z in it. So those are just some places where you can gain inspiration and knowledge, or use it as a tool of accountability. Okay, another resource, YouTube tutorials. Yes, there are YouTube videos that will tell you exactly how to put your book on the platform, what to write about, how to create things. And so utilize that. Today, I'm walking you through my personal experience, but my experience is not the only experience. It's one of many. And so watch, when you have an opportunity, watch self-publishing webinars and, hear feedback from other people. Get feedback, because you want to make sure that you are creating a work that will be an asset to your community. Now, I want to kind of stop, because I said to get feedback. And I feel like sometimes we tell people about things that are important to us, and then it turns out we find out we have some haters in our corner, and you're like, ooh, I never should have told them. Be careful. Be careful of telling some of your goals and visions to some people who may be inclined to hate on you. We're going to say no to the haters, and we're going to do what is beneficial to us. I'm going to be really honest with you. Fill your cup with people who breathe life into you, who are positive influences, who want to see you publish, who want to see you thrive. And for people who don't, maybe you don't tell them about your new book that you're creating. Because sometimes there are people in our circles who don't understand. And this may be your own thing. All right. So we're winding down, and I want to share just a recap. Right now is a great time for you to start putting your questions in the chat. If you have any questions for me and my journey, add them to the chat right now. If you have any worries about being able to publish your book, put that in the chat so that we can discuss it. So here are some key takeaways. Self-publishing offers creative freedom, but requires dedication. Right now, tell yourself, I can do this. I can do this. I'm here to tell you, I've done it, so I know that you can do it. I have a lot going on in my life, but I still try to find time to write, because Writing is something that makes me happy. It brings me joy. Know your audience and market your book. When do you start marketing? You start your marketing as soon as the idea pops in your head. If you are on social media, I did talk about the haters. Don't let people deter you, but now's the time to, start telling people, "Hey, I'm going to be writing a book about X, Y, and Z. And, over the next few months or a few weeks, I'm going to be sharing different things related to my book. Follow this journey with me. Let people know this is my first time publishing. This is something that's important to me. And, some of you said you were talking to different groups. You can start talking to those groups, start getting ideas, start finding out. So I know Cynthia said she wanted to write about the systems, especially the healthcare system. So one of the things that you can do, Cynthia, is those polls. What systems? So if you're a person living with a chronic illness, what systems are disruptive to your life? That's one of the questions. And then you could say, how do you feel the healthcare system is treating you today? Or how has the healthcare system treated you? That will allow you to come up with some of the pain points that people in your audience are dealing with. So you have to start kind of involving people now so that they can take part in it. So I'm going to share with you just real talk, real example from my life. The I Believe in Therapy book, the first year before I actually wrote the book, I did a video campaign called I Believe in Therapy, same name. And people were able to really start using that language, and they were able to see other people, and that really helped set the stage. It wasn't until year 2 that I decided to write the book. And so you want to give other people outside of your inner circle of friends and your inner circle of family members, you want to give them a chance to have a say. Because when people have a buy-in, they're more likely to support you. And if people are supporting you, that increases your chances of success. The next thing is use the right tools and resources to streamline the process. Some of you don't have your books written because getting started is overwhelming for you. So if that is you, if you say to yourself, wow, this just seems like too much, write in the chat, too much, too much. But we are really the team too much, because even if it's too much, I want to help you break that down so it's not too much for you. And I want you to be able to see it in small chunks so that you're able to do it. And one of the ways is to really find the right notebook. If you need to go out and buy a pretty notebook, because some of you need to buy a pretty notebook, because that is going to motivate you to get started. I know, like I chuckled a little bit because when my daughter was little and I wanted her to drink water, she didn't really like it all that much. But if I bought her a pretty water bottle, she was like, ooh, guzzling that water down. It's such a simple concept, but it's a concept that works. And, if you are a typer, you may use your tablet and you may just, write in notes. You can write on your cell phone. If you have an iOS device, they have a application called Notes. There have been books I've written in notes. Sometimes it's just jotting down the ideas that come to you. There was a time when I would keep like a notepad in my car, so that as different things came to me, sometimes I would get inspiration from buses, like from different ads and things like that. And I would want to write that down, or a mural. It evoked certain feelings. You're gonna, now that you have awakened this desire to write the book, you're going to now start getting and receiving inspiration from all different types of places. And so I encourage you to put that inspiration in your phone or in a notepad. Don't lose the notepad. So that's the key. Because I know some people, they don't keep up with stuff. You're gonna need to keep up with this. So it shouldn't be too big, you know. It should be in a way that you can take it with you, you can keep it with you, because this is really going to be your way to put your thoughts to paper. And then eventually you are going to have to type it up, or have someone type it up, or use text to talk. There's now lots of applications that will allow you to turn, where you could read it from your paper. Like, let's say you manually wrote it in your notebook, you could read it, and there are applications that will turn what you read into a written manuscript. And one of those is dictation. That's what that is called. And I think the program that I've used in the past is called Dragon Dictation. It's been a while since I've used it, so don't hold me to that, but I think that was the name. So again, use the right tools. The next call to action is what I shared earlier. Reflect on your goals, and we are going to actually meet again. I'm going to actually share a message with my colleague to find out. I don't think we've set the date, because the date that was on the calendar, I actually can't make it on that date. So you all who signed up for this class, you will be the first to know about the next class. And that's when we'll really start getting in the nitty gritty of writing the manuscript. And all of you most of you, you wrote about things for adults. So those things are going to take a little bit longer. So I don't anticipate that you'll be done in our next, by the time we meet again, but you might be. You might be. And so I do want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to ask your questions. Again, put your questions in the chat, because I do like that engagement. So, questions and next steps. What excites you most about self-publishing? So today we talked a little bit about vanity publishers, traditional publishing, indie publishing, which is self-publishing. And I hope that me sharing my experience as a self-published author, I hope that was able to inspire you that you can do this, and it's just a matter of time before you hold your book in your hands. And I do want to know, what challenges are you anticipating? I shared a lot of information today. Did anything scare you? Because I definitely don't want you to be overwhelmed. I want to talk this through so that you know how to break it down, so that becoming an author is attainable for you. And so that is something that we can do. So don't be afraid. No question is too small. No idea is, I don't like using the word dumb, but no idea is dumb. Share your ideas. Let me know what challenges you think are ahead, because I've been there before. Again, it took me 6 years from the time I wrote my book to me publishing it. And I will also say that I really didn't know that it was so many people who needed what I wrote. And I'm here to tell you, if there is a story in you, someone else is sitting in your seat. They're right in your position, and they wish they heard your story so that they could keep going. They wish they had a book that they could turn to, so that they would know there is hope on the other side. So even if you're not writing that type of book, let's say you trying to write a joke book or something like that, somebody needs those jokes. Somebody needs that. Whatever it is, someone else needs it. You just have to make sure you go through the steps, make sure you're not just writing to yourself and to your hurt, to your own pain, to your own truth, but you're also bridging in things that impact others and that other people can relate to. And so keep in mind that you really will need to define your target audience. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And we are going to just say, I am going to stop sharing this in a minute so that you all can share your questions and comments that you may want me to be aware of. I also want you to know how you can contact me if you have any questions. So I do have social media. I have a couple social media pages. Right now, I'm saying you can follow me at Cleverly Changing, but also I am also on Instagram. I am at I am L Cole. So that's where I share most things related to the type of books that I publish. So if that's what you're uniquely interested in, go to I am L Cole. That's where you would go to connect with me. And listen, I will make time to help you on this journey because it is important to me. And so I am going to stop sharing so that I can see what questions you all have. All right, all right. So I see you all are here. Oh, hi, Erin. Hi, Erin. Erin says, I love having that option to speak to my books. Sometimes me typing will slow down my thoughts, making me rethink to myself too. So absolutely, absolutely. Um, if that is you, if you can relate, definitely use an app that will allow you to speak to it. And sometimes it's really just changing the settings so you can Google, I have an iOS device or I had an Android, whatever type of device, you can Google, how do I speak to, because they have ADA accessibility on our devices. And so you can speak to talk and it'll write down what you said. So that's the cheap way. But another way is just getting an app to do it. So there are apps that will do it as well. All right. I can do it. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. All right. Too much, but I'm ready to accept the challenge. Yes, you can do it, Tarina. I am in your corner. I am rooting for you. I am cheering for you. You can absolutely do it. And I am so grateful that you accept the challenge. The next one is I like selling myself. I don't give myself enough credit and grace. So, all of us, every single one of us, have to give ourselves grace. And we have to be willing to put ourselves out there a little bit. I will say that I am very blessed. I don't like putting myself out there either. I know that's a surprise. I really don't. I am an introvert. That is a surprise. I know. But other people have been willing to tell people about my books and things like that. That has helped me get to where I am now, where I have sold thousands of books, is because other people believe in the work that I'm doing. And that's going to be true for you. But again, you cannot just rely on other people to do the work. You have to tell people too. So I probably would have sold a whole lot more books if I wasn't afraid to talk about it myself. And so you do have to put yourself out there and let people know. Oh, Tarina says you make it seem so easy. Again, it took me 6 years to write my first book and publish it. So it wasn't quick. And I had to have the courage. So a part of today is also encouraging you all to speak life to yourself. And that could be getting up in the morning and going to the mirror and saying, I am an author. So just starting your day saying, I am an author. So say it every day until, it's true for you. It's going to start with those little things. And for me, I'm going to share something a little bit personal. My mom really didn't understand what I did because I am a person who loves digital and computers and creating things. And she was like, I have no idea what she does, what my daughter does. But when I published a book and I became an author, she told all her friends. My daughter is an author. She was proud of me. That was something that she could really see and believe. It was something she understood. And so it really helped to change our relationship and change how I saw myself. And so if you need that, do your affirmations, go in the mirror and say, I am an author. And someone told me early on, they said, the moment you write that book is when you become an author. So let that sit. Let that sit. When you write it, not when you publish it. So that meant 6 years before I published my book, that was when I became an author. I didn't feel like I was an author until 6 years later when I had finally published it in 2020. But it was always a part of me. And so we don't want it to take you 6 years. That's why I'm telling you from start to finish, step by step, how to make this happen. So that is what is important. I see a question and it says, copywriting and publishing costs make me nervous. How did you keep your costs? How did you keep this cost minimal? So I like to be transparent. My first book that I published was a coloring book. So the most expensive part of the cost was my illustrations. My illustrations are not AI. They are illustrations. Every single one of those illustrations are illustrations that I had drawn. I described them, I tweaked them, I talked to my illustrator. We met, we went over. It was a grueling process. And that was the most expensive part. Editing, I had a couple editors. I would say they were very reasonable. I had a friend who was in graduate school. So she was one of my editors. And so she helped me keep the costs low. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Depending on what you want your first book to be, will really vary with the cost. So copywriting, that what we're talking about today, I feel like that isn't really coming into play because a lot of this, I'm trying to help you all do it on your own. So where I'm saying the books that people mentioned earlier, they weren't children's books so much. So because of that, a lot of you aren't going to be writing, having to get an illustrator. An illustrator can be costly. And that's because you want to make sure you own those illustrations. You don't want your illustrator owning the illustrations, giving you a, a cheap rate so that every time you sell a book, you got to give them a cut. You don't want to have to deal with that. You want to buy their illustrations outright. So I think that is the most expensive part. And from that one, from those first illustrations that I paid for, I actually wrote 3 books from that. So I was like, I gotta make this work for me. I gotta get my money back. I gotta get my money back. And so that was an advantage that I was able to use. That was creative. It was a creative way to make it work for me. But do you need money to publish? You can publish. So I would argue with the information that I'm sharing with you, you could do it at no cost. Now, I'm not saying do it at 0 cost because, again, I want you to hire an actual editor because I don't want your book to look like it was self-published. I also want you to hire a professional graphic designer to design your book. And I'm sharing that because we are living in a time where people are just typing stuff into these artificial intelligence models and spitting out stuff. To have the freedom that you want to own your content, own your words. I'm not teaching you to do it in an AI way. There are people who will, and do I know how you could do that? Absolutely, because you can train the models to write like you. And when I say models, I'm talking about the artificial intelligence models. You can upload, your own presentations, your own writing samples, and it can be your own ghostwriter. And technically, that could be at no cost. So that does exist. However, I'm encouraging you to be authentic, because that is what will separate you from other people. It's the authenticity, it's your stories, it's the realness. And so that's what I want you to bring to the table. I've mentioned that I have books. My books aren't concepts that are completely new, and they're things that all people, that many of you know about. It's not complicated, but there is an authenticity to it. It's clear that I wrote it, that, I put my own flair on it. And so I feel like that has helped it resonate with other people. Also, it has helped me be able to sell it. And I've had opportunities where I've done licensing deals. I've been able to license my work to other people and write another book through them that they sell. And they're crediting me as the author. So I'm trying to help you be able to do it. So these conversations are really about gaining a new skill set. So can I talk about artificial intelligent models doing it? I can, but that's not what we're going to talk about through these sessions, because I want you to be able to use your works for workshops, for presentations. I want it to open doors for you, just as becoming an author has opened doors for me. And so all of I have a book, my book 90 Days for Me, a self-love guide for parents, is a book that I created from start to finish by myself. So I illustrated it, I formatted it, I wrote the words, I created the cover, I did all of it. And I wanted to have a book where I did everything myself, because I wanted to tell people it was possible for them to do it too. So some of my books, I have a graphic designer create the cover, and all of those things are an illustrator. But all of my books, that isn't the case. And so, can you keep the cost down? Absolutely. And that is why we're having this conversation, because I'm going to help you keep costs down. It's really about working smarter, not harder, and knowing how to vet people. So, what I will do is just keep you on this journey where I'll let you know, I'll be pretty transparent about people I have used that have helped me. Now, as time goes on, we're living in a time where people's prices change. And so I can't say anything about people's prices, but there are people who are charging reasonable prices to do editing, layout, and design. Now, for your book cover, that's a cover artist. A graphic designer can do it, but just because somebody is an illustrator or a graphic designer does not mean they know how to create books. So you do have to specify that you need that person to create a book, because there are people who can do graphics. There are people who know the craft, but don't necessarily know how to put the book together. And so that does take a different skill set. And this particular class is broken into three different classes. So my program is 4 weeks, I believe. My program is 4 weeks, but for Dr. Rowley, this is through Cayenne Wellness Center. I'll be doing three different classes. So I will be putting two concepts together, and that will be our next class. So you'll be getting a lot of information. Today was really very informational. And so I'm trying to be real so that somebody doesn't take advantage of you. Do you, what I didn't share was the very first time when I first wrote my book, I went to other people I knew. My husband's a graphic designer. I asked him to create the illustrations. He didn't create the illustrations. It was hard to get started. I knew people who could help me. He had a friend who had published a lot of books, and he was like, "Oh, I'll charge you 5,000 to publish your coloring book." And I was like, "Well, it's a coloring book. That's going to take me a long time to pay it off to be able to make a profit." So I was like, "Ooh, no." I'm not going to be able to do that. So those are the type of things that you have to think. What am I investing in this? How long is it going to take for me to make my investment back? And so I'm trying to be personal, very personable, very candid and truthful about my experience so that you can too one day become an author. So I see some comments in the chat, and the next comment says, "I'm more than halfway there to my first book, but can't seem to feel overwhelmed about the last." So I think you're saying you feel overwhelmed about the last half. And so one of the things that we did a little bit earlier, we talked about breaking down this into small goals. So, instead of saying, "I'm just going to write the book from start to finish," you say, "Okay, this weekend I'll work on chapter 2. Next weekend, I'll work on chapter 3." Break it down into a small, attainable goal. If those chapters are long, you break it out into sections. I'm going to do one section. We also talked about using your phone to allot dedicated time to writing. So that is using the timer application to set a timer. It could be 30 minutes of uninterrupted time just writing. If you have more time, that could be an hour, but scheduling it in your day, putting it on your to-do list. When I was writing regularly, I would get up early because I'm a morning person. If you're a late night person, maybe you stay up a little later and allot the time that way. So it's being very intentional about how you schedule the time and adding in timers, not just kind of freehanding it, saying, "Oh, I'ma just write." No, be very intentional. Say, "I'm going to write between this time and this time for this length of time." So my recommendation is to do it for 30 minutes to an hour. I think when you get into 2 hours and longer, you overwhelm yourself. But if you're a person that's your jam, you go for it. That is not my jam. That's just going to be too much sitting for me. So my recommendation is that you use the apps to schedule it. All right. And so I see Gina says, "I am an author." Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Tarina says, "I am an author." Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Tarina. And Tisha says, "That would be so helpful. Yes, trusting others with your baby. You've motivated me to get back to work." Yay! Thank you so much for joining today and being willing to listen to my journey and listen to my experience and how this can be something attainable for you. And so I know that all of you who are listening can become authors. I wish you the best. And if you have another question, feel free to put it in the chat. If there are no more questions, we are just going to wrap up. But I feel like today has been inspiring and motivating. At least I hope it has for you. Let me know what you thought about today's presentation. If you can add that to the chat. Again, I'm a type of presenter that needs feedback, and I know we're not on a Zoom. You can't talk to me. So what I need you to do is, help motivate me and let me know that this was valuable to you and you appreciated it. So leave a comment in the chat as we wrap up. I also want to let you know about some other things that we will be covering in our future sessions. So we have 2 more sessions in the future, and we will be covering writing that manuscript. And I'm going to show you some feedback. I am going to give you some prompts. I said, I don't recommend you use AI to write your book, but I do recommend that if you need help refining your target audience, those are some things that I would recommend that you use AI for, helping you organize your outlines so that you make sure, like if your book needs to be sequential, those are things that I recommend you use it for. If you need help staying organized, perhaps you're having trouble coming up with small goals related to it. That's something that it can help you with. And so that's how we are going to approach it. I will be talking to you all about how to actually put the book on the platform. I will be talking about marketing. I will be talking about layout and design. One of the things that is unique. So just because you write a book doesn't mean it's going to be one size fits all for all platforms. It's not. Each platform is going to have unique criteria. So you're going to have to format your book cover separately depending on what platform. And today we talked about 2 platforms. That was Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark. And so the interior files will, they're pretty much similar, but those covers are very different for the platform. So the way you do a full bleed, and a full bleed is going all the way to the end of the paper. And so we're going to talk about what that means. And so we're going to get more into that. So our homework was to write 10 short-term goals and 10 long-term goals. When we come back, we're going to explore those short-term goals and those long-term goals. And if you want to send them to me so that you get feedback before next class, my email address that I shared earlier is contact@cleverlychanging.com. Again, it's contact@cleverlychanging.com. If you want to connect with me on Instagram, I'm at IamLCole. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. All right. I see a comment. It says, thank you so much. I always appreciate your classes. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining today, Erin. And it has been a pleasure to be able to talk to you. Tisha says, this was amazing. I'm looking forward to the next class. Yay! I have a treat in store for all of you. This was necessary, and I greatly appreciate your time and wisdom. Thank you so much, Gina, for joining today. And thank you to Cayenne Wellness Center for allowing me to come and share my expertise and my experience with all of you. And Tarina says, great job. I loved being here and hearing your story about being a great author. It was very positive, informational, and inspirational. Thank you, Tarina. Thank you. And what I am going to do, I do have homework for you all. The homework is 10 short-term goals and 10 long-term goals. I hope to see you soon. Have a good night. Bye, everyone. And thanks for joining. Again, next week, tell a friend, not next week, but I will let you know. I will send you an email if you registered so you will know when the next class is. All right, talk to you all later. In the meantime, definitely start writing, start doing your short-term goals. All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.